My name is Gloria, and ever since I was a kid, I'd always had a lot of energy. I never missed a day of school, from when I was little all the way through high school. Even after I turned 20 and started working, I managed to stay healthy without any major sicknesses until I turned 35. But when I hit 30, I noticed I wasn't as energetic as before. So I started exercising more and being careful about what I ate. Being positive since I was young helped me cope with things. But there was a time when I got really sick for the first time in my life, and it was tough. It even led to me getting a divorce. I felt like everything was falling apart, and I lost hope for a while. But now I've gotten better, and I've accepted what happened. When I turned 40, I started feeling strange. I'd get hot easily, feel out of breath even with small tasks, and get irritated over little things. At first, I thought it was just part of getting older, but it started affecting my life more. So I began to suspect something else might be wrong. Even though I was scared, my mother-in-law encouraged me to go to the hospital. Reluctantly, I went, and it turned out I had Graves' disease, a condition where my thyroid gland wasn't working properly. It caused symptoms like feeling hot, trouble sleeping, irritability, and weakness. It's more common in women, and if left untreated, it can lead to serious health problems. There's no complete cure, but I started treatment with medication from the hospital. The treatment didn't work right away, and I had to take time off from work to get better. Thankfully, my boss and coworkers were supportive. But sometimes, I'd worry that I'd never feel normal again and end up crying alone at night. My in-laws were always concerned about me. During weekdays when Orlando was at work, his parents would call to check on me, asking if I needed anything. Orlando's parents are really nice people. They've always been kind to me, especially after my illness was diagnosed. They made sure not to bother me too much, keeping phone calls short and never visiting without warning. I respect them a lot, almost like my own parents. But I tried not to show them how much I was struggling to avoid worrying them. However, Harriet, Orlando's mom, could see through my act. She told me it's normal to feel anxious about being sick, but nobody is to blame for it. She advised me to rest and focus on improving my health. She said the best way to do that is to rely on the people around me and cooperate with them. She even said they considered me like their own daughter and encouraged me not to hesitate to ask for help. Her words were so kind that they made me cry, but then Orlando, with his heartless words, made me wonder if he was really raised by such kind parents. Orlando and I didn't have any problems living together before my illness was discovered. But once I started feeling unwell, his attitude completely changed. Instead of being concerned, he acted as if I was a burden to him. I was too tired, both mentally and physically, to respond most of the time. There were days when I was too exhausted to even move. Of course, I had to ask him to buy groceries or eat out because I couldn't manage it myself. But whenever I asked, Orlando would sigh heavily, showing his annoyance. He complained about having to eat fast food because I couldn't cook. It seemed like his way of making things difficult for me, knowing I was too sick to cook. He often brought fried chicken, insisting that I needed to eat to regain my strength. I understood his reasoning, but when I couldn't eat, he'd scold me for not appreciating his effort. If I couldn't keep up with the housework and there was dust, he'd yell at me for the dirty floors. And when I was well enough to cook and he tasted the food, he'd complain that it tasted different from usual, questioning my cooking skills or whether I was losing my sense of taste. He'd eat the food I cooked, but then retreat to his room without saying a word. I realized something had to change. So I tried talking to Orlando about my illness and the difficulties I was facing, hoping for his support. "You're really sick. I mean, you never even had a cold before, so suddenly being ill, I gotta say, it's hard to believe," he said skeptically. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, it's suspicious. You were always healthy, and now you're suddenly sick. I find it hard to trust," he replied. I raised my voice, feeling shocked. How can anyone predict getting sick? Even I was shocked. But still, your illness has nothing to do with me. If housework is too hard, you can do it when you feel better. I married you thinking I wouldn't have to care for you in the future since you were always healthy. This feels like a betrayal, he said, laughing. Hearing him laugh, any remaining affection I had for him vanished. Orlando was never good with housework and wasn't very cooperative, but he was serious about his job and took care of the kids, so we managed. But I never expected him to be so indifferent, almost like it was someone else's problem. His hurtful words left me speechless, and I ended the conversation there. Later, he realized his mistake and apologized, but I ignored him. Our relationship completely broke down from that conversation. Determined not to rely on such a man, I pushed through the pain to do the housework. After finishing, I'd lock myself in the bedroom, avoiding Orlando as much as possible. At first, he tried to please me with flowers and cakes, but when he realized my feelings wouldn't change, he stopped trying. Then, in June of a certain year, when the weather was bad with continuous rain and low pressure making me feel worse than usual, Orlando said after returning from work, "There's a wedding next Saturday of a relative living out of state. My parents and I are planning to go, but with your condition and their long travel, you don't have to. It's an overnight trip, so we'll be back Sunday evening." Out-of-state relatives? Do you even have such relatives? I asked. We haven't met them much. It's natural to keep in touch just because we're family. You wouldn't understand since you don't have parents, he replied, getting a little angry. But that's just how it is, he said in a slightly mocking tone, and I finally got angry. Actually, I don't have parents. My parents divorced when I was young. I don't know my dad, and my mom raised me alone. Her struggles took a toll, and she passed away when I was 30. So it's true. I don't have parents, but I'm not completely alone in the world. Orlando knows this, yet he said that. And I got incredibly angry. Don't you have any sensitivity? I thought. Orlando seemed taken aback by my fury. He tried to pass it off as a joke, but I yelled, "There are things you just don't joke about." I was so angry that I exhausted myself, eventually just lying down. Orlando seemed a bit concerned, but he was busy preparing for a wedding we were supposed to attend. I was in no shape to go, so I asked if we could skip it. He flatly refused, saying, "Absolutely not." When I asked why, he said, "I don't know the couple well, but their parents have been a big help to my family for years. My dad told me they helped us financially in the past. We can't miss their child's wedding. I'm sorry, but I have to prioritize this." He said it lightly, so he clearly didn't feel bad. In the end, Orlando left me behind with a suitcase and hat. He even warned me not to contact him during the wedding, saying it would be rude. "If something happens, just call an ambulance or something," he said. This guy's hopeless, I thought. When he returns, we'll need to have a serious talk. I watched him leave without a word, thinking this would be the last time. But surprisingly, I felt lighter with Orlando gone. I even cracked a smile. Now, with a whole day to myself, what should I do? I decided to relax for a few hours since I had no plans. Just as I was dozing off, the doorbell rang suddenly. It was around noon. I checked the monitor, and to my surprise, Harriet, who shouldn't have been here, was standing there. I panicked and rushed to the door. Harriet looked worried and asked, "Are you okay?" I was so shocked that I could only utter a confused "huh." Harriet said she heard I was unwell from who, I asked. "Orlando," she replied. Then I asked her about the wedding, to which Harriet responded, "What wedding?" We stared at each other in silence, then decided to talk inside over tea. I asked her what brings her here today. She said she recently bought a shelf, but Palmer hurt his back. She called Orlando to help assemble it, but he said he was busy this Saturday and suggested next week. When I asked Harriet why she came, she told me Orlando said he was going out of state for a friend's funeral. I asked about me, and he said I was unwell and bedridden. I offered to take care of me or check on me, but he said it might make me feel worse, so it's best to leave me alone. Harriet was worried about leaving someone so sick alone, especially when Orlando said I was in bad shape. I was stunned by this completely different story. With trembling lips, I told her the reason Orlando gave me for leaving. Harriet was equally shocked, saying she had no idea. After a silent pause, I resignedly said, "Maybe he's with another woman." Harriet's demeanor changed drastically. Hearing her calmly say, "That bastard won't get away with this," was terrifying. After an infuriated Harriet asked if I could come to the house now, I was taken to the in-law house where Palmer, who was house-sitting, was. Palmer, understanding the situation, also got furious. He tried calling Orlando, but as expected, couldn't reach him. Palmer started getting annoyed and declared, "I'm going to where he is right now." Of course, I stopped him, and after several attempts, finally got through to Orlando. I had put the call on speakerphone, and Orlando, in a deliberately soft voice, said, "I'm in the middle of a funeral right now. I'll call you back later." Palmer immediately retorted, "What do you mean forgetting us at the wedding?" Orlando responded foolishly, "What, huh?" in a rather loud voice. Hearing this, Palmer said, "You're speaking so loudly at a funeral." "Well, I guess it's not a funeral. That's why you can talk like that calmly." But Orlando sounded shaken over the phone. Pressing Orlando further, Palmer said, "You told Gloria it was a wedding, right? But it's strange. I don't remember ever borrowing money from relatives." Orlando's excuses were all over the place, suggesting a misunderstanding, or that he intended to go to the wedding, but prioritized a coinciding funeral instead. Palmer, tired of Orlando's excuses, exclaimed, "Enough already. I know all about your lies. There's no point talking over the phone. Just come back now. I'll listen to your excuses here, but I'm not forgiving you." I, too, was a bit scared listening to Palmer's rage. Orlando seemed to feel the same, but said he couldn't come back right away. When he mentioned bringing me home, I interjected, "I'm right here, though." He exclaimed in surprise, "Huh." As he kept making nonsensical excuses, I said, "Like Palmer said, there's nothing we can do over the phone. Come back now. There's no point talking about it here." Without listening to any more of Orlando's excuses, I hung up the phone. After that incident, I thought about going back home, but my in-laws were worried about leaving me alone. So I decided to stay at their place during that time. Harriet asked me what I was planning to do about Orlando. I told her that I was definitely getting a divorce. It's just not working out anymore. Then, the next day, even though Orlando said he would be back by evening, he returned around 10 in the morning, looking incredibly awkward, and meeting with all four of us started immediately, and as expected, Orlando had gone on a cheating trip. He was with a woman in her 20s whom he had picked up at a bar. They hit it off after some light flirting and ended up having a relationship. This trip was apparently planned at her request. After hearing this, I asked him why he lied about something that involved his parents. He said he thought it would be troublesome if his affair was discovered while he was away, especially to his parents. Palmer, my father-in-law, was furious. He scolded Orlando, saying, "You stupid son," not just because Orlando betrayed his wife, but also because he used the excuse of someone's death and his parents for his infidelity. Orlando, who's always been unable to go against his parents, especially Palmer, kept apologizing. But Palmer told him he was apologizing to the wrong person. Orlando then hurriedly apologized to me, but such a cheap apology was not enough for forgiveness. When I said we were getting a divorce, Orlando begged me not to, promising to change his ways. However, I told him, "The way you treated and spoke to me when you learned about my illness was bad enough. But to think you would also cheat, I cannot forgive a man like that. Even if we tried to rebuild our relationship now, you might do the same or worse if you got sick. I don't want to become such a terrible person, so let's get divorced." He kept apologizing, ignoring what I said. I told him it's unforgivable, but he continued to apologize. So I got fed up, and eventually, Palmer kicked him out. After that, with the help of my parents-in-law, we started divorce proceedings with a lawyer. Surprisingly, the negotiations went smoothly and were settled without much trouble. However, the affair was only discovered by chance, and if Harry hadn't come, I would have never realized Orlando was cheating. There was almost no evidence of the affair, so the compensation from the other woman was very minimal. But receiving compensation was also a way to prove that the other party was at fault, so I accepted it, thinking it was enough to know that they were guilty. After all, who would want a man who cheats on a sick wife? Orlando was just seen as a wallet, and after everything was settled, he was dumped by his affair partner, which made me laugh. Even after divorcing Orlando, I kept in touch with my parents-in-law. Harriet visits me about twice a month at my new place, and I occasionally visit the in-laws' house. It's nice that we've kept our good relationship. Orlando was disowned by his parents and banned from their house. They were so angry and disgusted with him, saying, "You're no son of ours. We disown you. Go wherever you want." When Orlando heard this, he was shocked. He didn't expect to be disowned. He tried to come back once, thinking they were still family, but Palmer chased him off, saying, "Didn't I tell you not to come here?" and threw water on him. Harriet told me about it, but my parents-in-law always cared for me, so even though I was down for a while after the divorce, I got over it pretty quickly. My health has been improving since the divorce, and I'm planning to return to work soon. I still have to deal with medication and checkups for my illness, but I'll overcome it with my natural